From the Gospel of Matthew. At that time, having heard of the death of John the Baptist, Jesus withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself, but when the crowds heard of it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he disembarked, he saw a large crowd. He was moved with compassion for them and healed their sick. As evening drew near, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they can go into the villages and buy themselves food." But Jesus said to them, "They do not need to go away, you give them something to eat." They answered him, "We have nothing here except 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." And he ordered the crowd to sit down on the grass, and taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed, broke the loaves, and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowd. They all ate their fill and took up the fragments left over, 12 baskets full. Those who had eaten were about 5,000 men, not counting women and children. Dearest sisters and brothers, on this 18th Sunday of Ordinary Time, the evangelist Matthew presented us with a very well-known passage because it is recounted 6 times in the Gospels, in the Gospel of Matthew and Mark, twice, with some differences in the accounts, and then again in the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of John. This passage is usually referred to as the multiplication of the loaves and fishes or the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. However, if we listen carefully to the passage we just read, it does not speak of multiplication and it does not speak of a miracle. It speaks of food passing from the hands of the apostles to the hands of Jesus, who then, after raising his eyes to heaven and pronouncing the blessing, returns this food to the apostles, who distribute it to the crowd, 5,000 men, not counting women and children. So the first thing we need to do is to reframe our understanding of this passage. It's not the presentation of Jesus as an omnipotent God who, from nothing or very little, 5 loaves and 2 fish, for example, creates the food needed to feed a huge population. Rather, it's something different, something more interesting, something that concerns us more closely. Naturally, we created this small representation before me precisely to keep in mind the reality and symbol that Jesus wants to convey to us. The reality is the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, the symbol is the Eucharist, represented by the chalice and paten, which also represent the loaves and fish that those who visited the Holy Land were able to purchase and bring back to Italy. The reality is the material food we need, the symbol is the Eucharist. This story evokes this food, and it is fundamental in the life of every person, in the life of every believer, because the Eucharist is the very source and summit of every believer's life. We could say that after the 7 parables that occupied 3 Sundays of our month of July, Jesus now tells us a parable through a fact, through an event, and not just through his words. Therefore, we must pay attention to the setting of this story and to all the details, because they conceal the real message Jesus wants to convey to us. The setting is a crossing that Jesus makes from one shore of the Sea of Galilee to the other. Naturally, what does that matter to us? Whether the loaves and fish were eaten on one side of the lake or the other, nothing. But if we think of the Jews, the crossing of the sea immediately brings to mind the Exodus, the crossing of the Red Sea, and therefore the passage from slavery to freedom. From a time when the Jewish people lacked dignity, oppressed by the Egyptians, to the moment when, through the desert, they would reach the promised land, the land of freedom, the land of dignity. Here, then, is the first passage. Jesus is saying, "I am making an exodus with you. I want to lead you out of the world of slavery, the old world, with its old rules that don't respect people's dignity, but take advantage of their need so that some can become richer and richer, while the majority, alas, become poorer and poorer." Even the fact that people follow him on foot is a reference to the Exodus, because the Jewish people left Egypt on foot. And in the story of the Exodus, only men are mentioned, not women and children, just like in this episode Matthew tells us, but which, as already mentioned, all the evangelists tell us. And then the reference to the desert. As I was saying, the Exodus unfolds through the desert. The desert journey is the path that leads the people to freedom, because specifically around the Sea of Galilee, there is no desert. There are 3 fertile plains, which therefore make the landscape truly different, and indeed we will see it. At a certain point the desert will disappear. This is to tell you and ourselves that the setting reminds us that Jesus is telling us something more. We learn to build our own Exodus journey, the passage from an old world to a new world, from an old logic of competition, of opposition, to a new logic of giving, of solidarity, of mutual aid, of generosity. And so this is the setting. Many people follow him, and in the numbers the Gospel reports, we discover that among these many people lies the entire Jewish people, and indeed the whole of humanity. In fact, the number that represents their people for the Jews is the number 5. When 3 zeros are added to this number, it becomes 5,000. In the Jewish mindset, this means the entire Jewish people, the whole of Israel, which here, since the Gospel is addressed to the entire world, represents all humanity, a humanity that desires to follow Jesus, a humanity that is not the one depicted in advertising, not the fake one without problems, but the real one that has needs, that has necessities, that has problems. In the Gospel, people who follow Jesus often have difficulties and problems of a physical, psychological, or spiritual nature, and the encounter with Jesus allows them to resolve these problems, to find a solution to these issues, to open up a perspective for living daily reality differently. They meet at dusk, and at dusk the disciples, who in the passage represent the world and therefore the old logic, the human way of reasoning, say to Jesus, "Jesus, we have done our part. These people came to hear your gospel, the good news, the wonderful things you had to tell them. Now they've heard them, send them home. We shouldn't concern ourselves with their material needs. We shouldn't concern ourselves with their concrete lives. We've responded to the needs of their hearts, let them take care of the rest. In other words, whoever God wants, let them pray to him. Let's send them to nearby towns, so they can buy food to sustain themselves, so they can find lodging where they can sleep if necessary." The apostles didn't care whether everyone would be able to find food or shelter. They didn't consider that perhaps those who were healthier, able to walk faster or even run faster, could arrive first, take what they needed and even what was superfluous, without worrying about what others might take and eat. The apostles didn't care whether everyone had the money to buy according to the logic of the market, the logic of buying and selling what they needed. For them, what they had to do was finished, they no longer cared. But Jesus doesn't think the same way. Jesus doesn't abandon people. Jesus cares for each person as they are, in their entirety. Jesus cares for each man and woman, each child, each adult, each elderly person, as they are, with their intelligence, their will, their heart, and their body. So Jesus says, "Look, I want to make you a different proposal. I want to propose a new way of approaching things. I want to propose to you a new logic that is the expression of a new world, the expression of a new heaven and a new earth. I want to propose to you a logic that is no longer based on the power of money, on buying and selling, on possessions, but is based on giving, on generosity. Give yourselves something to eat. But we have nothing, we only have 5 loaves and 2 fish. There's a hidden symbol in this too, because 5 plus 2 equals 7, which in the Bible is the number that indicates perfection and totality, therefore. With 7 realities, Jesus meant that we can respond to the totality of needs, we can respond to the totality of the needs that all humanity presents. So Jesus says, "Bring them here to me." It's an order, an imperative that Jesus uses, and when Jesus uses an imperative, when Jesus orders something, it's because he knows there's resistance on the other side, a refusal to share the new logic he was proposing. And so Jesus must impose himself so that the apostles think differently. Jesus must impose himself so that the apostles do things different from what they had in mind. They bring him these 5 loaves and these 2 fish, and Jesus raises his eyes to heaven and pronounces the blessing. That is, he recognizes that those things don't belong to people, but are a gift from God. In fact, St. Paul says in his first letter to Timothy, chapter 6, "When we came into the world, we brought nothing into it, and when we leave the world, we will take nothing with us." Everything that belongs, everything we see in our life, is essentially not ours, it has been given to us. Born, and it is within the logic of gift that we must manage things. This is what Jesus wants to tell us. He wants to remind us of this necessity to enter into a new and different logic. After recognizing that everything comes from God and, as St. Paul always says, that greed, the desire for riches, lies at the root of all evil, of all conflicts, of all the wars that shake the world, Jesus gives this food back to the apostles so they can distribute it to the immense crowd that was there, a crowd that Jesus had stretched out on the grass. Do you remember? We said the place was deserted, now the grass appears. It was evening, now it almost seems like broad daylight. This means that when you encounter Jesus, when you embrace his new logic, when you accept his proposal for a new world, it is as if you entered an oasis, it is as if you entered the earthly paradise, it is as if you entered a different world, where you feel better, where you can truly live as children of God, as men and women, and among them, brothers and sisters. After all, if there were no call to God, if there were no raising of the eyes and pronouncing the blessing, why should I share my things with others? Why can't I take advantage of every circumstance to enrich myself more and more, even at the expense of the dignity and lives of others? It is the reference to God that makes us children, that makes us brothers and sisters who are attentive to the dignity of people and respect for the entire world, even respect for creation itself. Indeed, the apostles began to distribute, becoming their servants. Of those who reclined, because the masters reclined at the table, free men, servants, and slaves had to remain standing, ready to serve. Here Jesus is telling the apostles, and us, today's disciples, you must be ready to serve those who are your masters, those in need, those who are poor, those who knock at your door. You must always be ready to respond to what they ask of you, because this is how the new world, the new logic of Jesus, is established. During the Last Supper, Jesus says, taking the bread, "This is me, this is my body, take it, eat it. I have given my life as a gift to you, you must give your life as a gift to others." If you are with me, it means you have accepted this logic. It means that with me you want to be like the bride to her groom, uniting your life with mine to complete what I have begun. This is what the Lord asks of me, this is what he asks of you, to enter into the logic of giving, to enter into the logic of service. The interesting thing, then, is that while the starting point was the fear that there wouldn't be enough, 5 loaves and 2 fish, what can we do with so little? Now we have the collection of leftovers. There are 12 baskets left over. 12 is the number of the tribes of Israel, 12 is the number of the apostles. The ancient Israel, the new Israel, the ancient humanity, the new humanity. If we enter into Jesus' logic, not only is there enough food and supplies for everyone, but there is even more, there is even excess. This is what we must understand, even scientists tell us. Even those who study society tell us, what the world produces today is simply not enough for everyone. There is more if it isn't enough, because many people are dying of hunger, many peoples live in conditions of degradation, it is precisely because we are still in the old logic. It's precisely because we haven't yet embraced Jesus' new logic. We consume and waste so much food, we consume and waste light, water, energy, and land, because we want to hoard, because we want to be first, because we don't embrace the logic of brotherhood, sharing, giving, generosity, and service. What a beautiful message! At the beginning of this month of August, the Lord offers us the story of the sharing of the loaves and fishes. And that this story should be read symbolically is also demonstrated by the fact that after the evening has disappeared, after the desert has disappeared, the fish also disappear. 12 baskets of bread are left over. Bread is the symbol of the Eucharist. Bread is the symbol through which Jesus says, "I have given myself as a gift to you, you must give yourselves as a gift to others." Let us embrace this message, and from now on, from this holiday season that I invite you to enjoy to the fullest, let us become men and women, young people, adults, children, and the elderly, capable of living according to the new logic of Jesus, according to the logic of the kingdom of God, where everyone can live with dignity, everyone can live as children, brothers and sisters. Have a great summer.